Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm very honored today to welcome a very special guest, Iqbal Nasim. Iqbal, for a short introduction, he's based in the UK. He's an educator, speaker, writer, former investment banker, and until very recently, CEO of the National Zakat Foundation in the UK. Assalamu alaikum, Iqbal. Thanks for sharing the time to be with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for organizing this, and thanks to everybody for attending.
Before starting, a small overview of how we will proceed with this live interview. It's the first time I do that, and it's the first time in English as well, so it's going to be fun. So first, we'll conduct a 45-minute interview, followed by a 15-minute Q&A session. You can either type your questions in the chat or wait until the Q&A sessions to ask them directly to him, inshallah. So Iqbal, are you ready to be cooked the French way?
Let's do it.
All right, cool. So Iqbal, could you tell us more about your background and what you are up to today?
Yeah, sure. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. In the name of God, the Lord of mercy, the giver of mercy, all praise belongs to God, and blessings and peace upon the messenger of God. So I was born in London, grew up here. I studied economics and management at university. I graduated in 2005. I spent a few months abroad at that stage in Jordan, where I was doing some Arabic studies and doing some further Quranic studies as well. And in 2006, so almost 16 years ago now, I started working in investment banking. I was an equity analyst, like a stockbroker, if you like. And that's what I did for the next 5 years or so. Whilst I was there, I had this growing feeling that I wanted to do something a bit more meaningful, if you like, a bit more substantial. And so I, long story short, ended up in 2011 at an organization called Mercy Mission, which had just launched a project called National Zakat Foundation. And so by the end of that year, it ended up working out that I was then project managing the National Zakat Foundation in the UK. So that was what I was doing. And then by the end of 2013, because the project had grown, it span out into a separate organization, an entity. And so I became the chief executive, the CEO of that, of National Zakat Foundation in its new structure. And, you know, alhamdulillah, I continued then for the next few years, just until November. So just last November was my last month there. So it was basically 10 years I spent in National Zakat Foundation. And alhamdulillah, it grew to a substantial size in the UK, also came up in 4 other countries, in Europe, actually, in Holland and Switzerland, as well as Australia and Canada. And then, then more recently, or in the last couple of years, whilst I was at National Zakat Foundation, I put together and began teaching a course on Salat called Transform My Prayer. And that started at the end of 2019. And I found that both in my work at NZF and through the teaching of this course, I found that what I really enjoyed doing the most, and I found beneficial for myself and beneficial for others, was just really sometimes, you know, going back to basics and just explaining really the basics of the deen in a way that was hopefully inspiring and relatable, you know, for people. And so that's what I've been doing, really. And then effectively, that's what I'm doing kind of full time now. So as a combination for the combination of topics I'm addressing. So one is Salah, Transform My Prayer. I also do run a course called Club Revelation, which is basically like a medium-term program to explore Quranic themes and to try and understand them better, to help people familiarize themselves with topics in the Quran and how that can affect them. And also I have a program called Last Day Leader. The idea of this is to help people think about how they can become better leaders. We can explore obviously what that means today, because a lot of what we will talk about today, or the topic of today, is related to that. But yeah, ultimately my aim, to summarize and to finish now, my aim is to help people lead truly God-centered lives. And specifically the ways in which I'm trying to do that is to help them achieve a connection with their Lord through prayer, through Salah, to help them achieve clarity through revelation, through the Quran, and to give them, or to help them have the courage to fulfill their leadership potential. And by leadership potential, then I mean that doing as much as one possibly can in service of God's cause, which is then the title of this discussion. And then, of course, we can elaborate, what we mean by that. So that's what I'm doing. And so I teach courses, I write, put out sort of just messaging and stuff, and a combination of things like that, just to help people and help myself first and foremost.
Jazakallah khairan for the presentation. I think it was clear. So the theme of this conversation is in service of God's cause. So what is your definition of being in service of God's cause, striving for God's cause? And has your understanding of it evolved over time?
Sure. So, so the Arabic phrase, when we say God's cause, the phrase in Arabic that I'm referring to is fi sabilillah. So all over the Quran, you have the word fi sabilillah. We are told to strive fi sabilillah, and we're told to spend fi sabilillah. Yeah. And so the average Muslim, when they hear the phrase fi sabilillah, the first thing that usually comes to mind is that that involves doing something for free. I'll do it fi sabilillah. Yeah, I'll do it in God's way. And the implication often is, I don't want payment. I'll do it fi sabilillah. Yeah, this is often a common kind of interpretation sometimes. I think when we say God's cause, the way to understand it is, and to distinguish it from maybe doing something like lillah, yeah, or liwajhillah, if you like, right? So we also have these phrases as well, which might be more to meaning for God's pleasure or for God's sake. Now, there's an important distinction. So we have to distinguish between these terms. So when we're talking about doing something for God's sake or for his pleasure, what we mean is that our motivation of whatever the action is for him to be pleased with us and to do something which simply aligns, generally speaking, with our being his servant. Okay. Now so it means that we're doing an action which is in line with what he wishes from us, and it also means that it is something which pleases him. However, the beyond that, when we're talking about doing something for God's cause, what we are referring to is something that facilitates the straight path for other people. So if doing something for God's sake is us traveling ourselves on the straight path, doing something for God's cause means that there is there's a mission that goes beyond like myself simply, and there is a cause, there is something to strive for that has an effect, a social effect, an impact on other people. And fundamentally what it means is to to facilitate the path for others. So we talk about, we ask every day for guidance on the straight path. Ihdina Salat al-Mustaqim. We're trying to journey towards Allah in everything that we are doing and saying, and just every aspect of our lives. And just like any other journey, so just really make it really simple, just think about any other journey. I can go on a journey from A to Z myself. And whilst going on that journey, I can facilitate that journey for other people as well and help people go on that journey. And when you do something for God's sake, it's like you're moving forward on your own journey. When you do something for God's cause, you're actually facilitating the same journey for other people at the same time. And in the Quran, all over the Quran, Allah is asking us to become such people, right? That we have a concern. And fundamentally, you can say it's like the main prophetic concern, right? Prophets were sent in order to facilitate the path for people, to show them the way to go. And so that's basically what we're trying to do. We're trying to go on that way ourselves, but also all of us within our capabilities should constantly think to ourselves, and this is what I mean by leadership, because leadership is simply influencing someone else in a positive direction. And in our case, ultimately, the direction in which we need to influence people is towards Allah, because on the Day of Judgment, that is the kind of influence that fundamentally would have mattered. So it's just for all of us to think individually and collectively about what can we do in order to facilitate more people having the opportunity to find their Lord, basically, and to find guidance and to live in a guided way.
So you're saying it's not enough to be focused on our own relationship with God and what we do for God, but just, for example, the prayer and just having like giving money to charities just for our own sake. You're saying it's not enough to do that. You need to be also focused on the overall context and how we can help the Muslim and the people in our context to get closer to God.
Right, exactly. So the thing is that it's about saying, well, you know, the most obvious, most of us, our main sphere of influence will be in our immediate localities, immediate society surroundings, what have you, or even if we are away from, as I know you are, for example, halfway around the world or wherever you are, right? That you are, but where you have some sort of social or cultural kind of overlap, or what's called social cultural capital, or some affinity, So you have more of an understanding of the ways that people think, the people, the language, etc., the culture, and Allah says, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا رَسُولًا إِلَّا بِلِسَانِ قَوْمِهِ in Surah Ibrahim, chapter 14. Allah says that we didn't send a messenger except by literally the tongue of his people. But the tongue, meaning language, meaning culture, meaning there's a bond between the messenger and the people who are being called. Now, to the extent that we also want to be messengers, if you like, we are trying to, as Allah says, يُبَلِّغُونَ risalat, right? That they people who are conveying the messages, we want to become such people. This is in Surah Al-Ahzab, chapter 33. That if we want to be people who are helped to continue to convey the message, then typically we will do that, with people where we have some sort of bond, some sort of link. There's some sort of cultural or other kind of overlap that allows the message to translate. Now, so what I'm saying is that we all need to think about or envision what if today we all recognize that we typically are living in societies, communities where, where God is not, if you like, uppermost, not being, he's not the center point of what is driving people and community and society. In fact, if anything, over recent years, hundreds of years, but especially, it seems to be accelerating, that if anything, the opposite is the case. Like actually that any consideration or belief in the divine, is declining. People are not interested, et cetera, et cetera. So there's that going on. So we need to think about, okay, well, how can we resolve this situation? Because from our perspective, this is a problem. And if you think about it, like, it doesn't make sense for any of us to treasure and to value our own belief, but not to value the fact that other people would also find the same thing, because it's a major issue. Like, the consequences of disbelief in this life and the next are very significant, and that's why we need to take seriously. It should be something completely natural to us. If we have a natural and a close and a relationship with our Lord, what naturally follows from connecting with our Lord through prayer, from engaging in the recitation and the understanding of the Quran, from being empathetic, charitable, concerned people, what naturally follows is that we want to bring about a state in society that is in the best interest of everybody. And that is when not just me, you, whoever, and us here, but all of us, all of the people around us, are invited to and start to live God-centered lives. That's the point. So and as I said, there's many verses in the Quran which push us towards this as well. Yeah.
So are you also saying that if we are only focusing on our own relationship with God without trying to have an impact around us to facilitate the worship of God, are we failing somewhere? Is it something that
definitely
is
incomplete?
Bad? Yeah.
No, so it's definitely incomplete, right? So it's all about like the levels, right? The levels of relationship. So look, it's interesting. So at the end of Surah Al-Hajj, chapter 22, the last two verses are very interesting. So Allah says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu rka'u wasjudu wa'budu rabbakum waf'alul khayra la'allakum tuflihun. This is the penultimate verse, I think, verse 77. That you who believe, bow down, prostrate, ruku', sujud, serve, worship your Lord, waf'alul khayr, and do good, la'allakum tuflihun, so that you'll be successful. Then the next verse, وَجَاهِدُوا فِي اللَّهِ حَقَّ جِهَادِهِ, strive for God as much as he deserves, or as much as is his right. Haqqa jihadi. Now, what does that mean? That means that that striving, pushing forward. So it's not just we do ruku, sujood, we worship, we just try and do good here, but there's something very specific. Even the distinction, I mean, the last thing that's mentioned in the previous verse is do good. But then on top of just general idea of doing good, there's something about specifically jahidu fillah, like striving for God. In another place, ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullah wabtaghu ilayhi alwasila wajahidu fi sabilihi la'allakum tuflihun. You who believe, be conscious of God, seek ways to come close to him. وَابْتَغُوا إِلَيْهِ الْوَسِيلَةِ, yeah, find or seek ways to come close to him, and strive in his cause so that you'll be successful, right? So we can see that in both of these verses, what's interesting is that this specific striving is mentioned in addition to or alongside the standard things that we will think about, taqwa, doing good, bowing down, prostrating, right? Serving, ibadah, worshipping. There's a specific emphasis. And so, yeah, like it's a little bit like, if you give an analogy, right? Like think about any cause. So this is really useful for us to think about in this way. So think about any cause whatsoever. Think about, right now with the war with Russia invading Ukraine was very interesting. I don't know how it is obviously in the local media as you guys are seeing it, but certainly one of the very interesting things that's featuring, right, from what we're seeing is that, okay, Ukraine is under attack, and now civilians are being armed and taking up arms to defend, right, the country. Okay, and they're being glorified for doing so. Yeah, and as far as we're concerned, rightly so. I mean, obviously, that's a noble thing, obviously, right, and a brave thing, and people will lose their lives in the service of their cause. Now, that's one example. Another example is, for example, take the example of the whole LGBT, right, and the whole kind of the cause of equal rights for people of who have different sexualities or whatever. Now, whatever we might think about it, the reality is that amongst those people, think about it now. Amongst those people, there are some of them who simply they'll say, "Oh, I'm homosexual," and they'll carry on doing whatever they're doing, but they're not facilitating anything. They're not striving or doing anything for anybody else. But there are amongst them, there are those people who have set up organizations, institutions, they lobby, they have been advocating policies, they have written papers, they've protested, right? They've fought little battles in their own workplaces and wherever in order for their cause to become manifest. And it's only because people have made that kind of effort that we have seen over the last decade or few decades a major shift in the way in which society understands, conceives of that particular issue. Similarly with the environment, right? There's the multiple levels at which we can do. Each of us in our own homes can try to be eco-friendly. We might recycle, we might do this, we might do that. We might just do our part. But then amongst the people, there are those who go even further. They encourage other people to do their part. They campaign, they write policy papers, they dedicate their lives to trying to alert people to the dangers of climate change, etc. So what we're talking about here for us it's the same kind of thing, right? As far as God's cause is concerned, you have those people who might worship God. They remember God, they praise God, right? Etc. But amongst the people as well are those who go further. They strive for God's cause. They get other people they tell other people about God. They remind other people. They encourage others to come forward. They try and demonstrate and articulate to people why it's in all of our best interest to remember him and to prepare for meeting with him, etc. So this is basically what it is. It's just levels of contribution. And for all of us here, in order to we all want to be the best we can be. Now, none of us are here because we want to live average lives. We want to excel. And because we know that on the day of judgment, Allah will seek, and he says this in the Quran, he's seeking to prove or to show or giving us an opportunity to demonstrate which of us are amongst the best. وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ حَتَّى نَعْلَمَ الْمُجَاهِدِينَ مِنْكُمْ وَالصَّابِرِينَ وَنَبْلُوَ أَخْبَارَكُمْ. chapter 47, Surah Muhammad. Okay, we will certainly keep testing you until we know, right? Basically, which means until you prove to us which of you are truly the strivers and truly the steadfast, and we will test your claims. Yeah, وَنَبْلُوَ أَخْبَارَكُمْ. Because lots of us, we may in conversation or inside of ourselves, we may, there's two things. We say, La ilaha illallah, there is no God but God. He's the number one to be served. So therefore, simply as a result of that, what he wants from us should be important to us. And then the question is, are we doing enough to align ourselves with what he wants of us? That's number one. But also, we will sometimes in conversation with others, we will have said, we hope how things can be better. We want Islam to flourish in society. We'll talk about these things, but oftentimes we don't do enough to support these things happening. So that's the thing. And I just want to say at this stage one thing, which is very important, which is in the end, it doesn't matter as much what actually happens as a result of our efforts. What will have mattered is whether we made the effort. So how things turn out and their apparent success or not, that ultimately, it's not that it doesn't matter at all, but because there are obviously, it does matter to a degree in terms of how we relate to it, learn from it, etc., and move forward. But I'm saying in the end, what actually happened in the end is not as important as what we intended and what we strove for and the effort that we put in. So that's just something which is important, and it's also, which is nowadays, because of the very difficult circumstances in which believers find themselves in different parts of the world, and because of sometimes it seems almost the idea that, for example, in quote unquote Western countries, the idea that Islam might flourish in such societies feels like might feel overly ambitious to us right now. Like it doesn't feel possible given how things are, right? But of course, interestingly, in many of these places, it has been the case historically. That's number one. And also, again, the point being is that, whilst it's easy to become pessimistic about the state of the world, the state of people, where everything is at, our own state, frankly, it is easy to become pessimistic. It's just that, that narration that we know, where the Prophet ﷺ is reported to have recommended to us that even if the last day, now comes and you have a seed in your hand and you're about to plant it, you should plant it. A very powerful narration, very famous narration. But the idea being that even a small effort and input, because all we're trying to do is demonstrate to our Lord that we care and we are interested and we're going to put the effort in. And that's really, in the end, what matters.
In your personal journey, what was your mindset when you decided to quit as an investment banker? Did you think that you were not struggling enough for Allah's cause, or what was in your mind at this time?
And basically that was it. I mean, even though at that time, because it was a while ago, even at that time, my way of thinking about things or my ideas weren't necessarily very, they weren't necessarily as clear to me as they are now, for example. Or I might have sort of, thought about it in a slightly more, call it a primitive or early stage kind of way. But still, fundamentally, that was the main thing. My main thing was this. It was like, if I was to die now, like, what do I have to show for it, basically? That was really that was the question I was asking myself. Like, what am I spending my time and my life doing that is worth, showing or demonstrating? That's really what was the thing. And a lot of us, again, there's a lot of societal, circumstantial kind of things to do with this, but like a lot of us, our lives, our very identities end up being defined by the work that we do. Even when we have conversations with each other, we meet new people for the first time. Assalamu alaikum, so what do you do? Yeah. Right. Yeah. Oh, I'm an engineer, I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor. Like that becomes like who you are, like your definition almost. And sometimes some of us will try and fit other things along the side, but ultimately a lot of us, I'm not saying doing any of these things is wrong, of course, I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that it's important for us to think about what our, how we're spending the bulk of our time, our effort, our mental energy, like where it's going. And for many of us, if it wasn't for the fact that we, like a valuable question, and as you know, Abdelrahmen, like a question that I ask myself and I get other people to think about for themselves, is if it wasn't for the money, right? If I didn't need the income, if I didn't need any, so there's two parts to that question. If I didn't need the income right now, would I do what I'm doing with my life right now? So the parts of life, the things that I do currently, which are related to me earning an income, if I didn't need that income because I had enough money, would I still do those things? So the question that we're asking ourselves is there a deeper link between us and the things that we spend our time on? Is there something deeper than simply of the income that we receive? So that's number one question. The other question is, which is related, we'll say, okay, at the very least, if I didn't need the income and I had kind of full freedom to just spend my time doing whatever I need to do because I had a regular salary coming in from wherever and, without having to do any effort, what would I do? How would I spend my time? Because many of us, we have even lost sight of what we would hope to, what we think the best thing to do in our lives would actually be. Do you understand? So there's two problems. One is almost a lot of our time gets bought by companies, institutions, whoever, right? We trade our labor and our time for their causes. That's how it is. That's what it is, right? Let's be honest, right? If we are, whatever we're doing, we're an engineer working at some engineering company, a lawyer working for a law firm, a finance person working for a bank or financial institution, right? Somebody owns that entity. They have a vision, they have a cause, they are out there trying to do something. And you and me, we're just one cog, right, in their machine that they're pulling together, right? And they're buying your time to go and help them achieve that thing. That's not that you're not getting anything out of it. But the question basically is, it's important to just understand, to see what is actually happening there, the exchange that is taking place, right? And so so for me, when I thought about that, it's like, why am I putting my talent, my skills, my time, my energies into serving this person's cause or whatever? They may be paying me very well for it, but is that what life is about for me? So I decided, no, that's not what life is about, basically. And I want to dedicate myself in some way to further the deen in some way. How can I make the future for Islam and Muslims in the United Kingdom better? That was my thinking at the time. And my experience is that simply, even though at that time I had a very strong intention and like not really anything like a plan, alhamdulillah, like over the years, and at that time and over the years, I have felt many times that Allah has opened doors and opportunities and resources, and from places I didn't expect and I didn't know. I feel that it's because of what was, at least at that time, like just a very strong, clear, pure intention. Like I obviously normally we don't talk about our intentions, and we should, in a sense that none of us should claim necessarily, or we should be very careful to claim sincerity of intention. And I'm not claiming it generally, but I do know, I'm pretty confident that at that particular point in time, I just had a very clear, strong desire and intention and motivation that for Allah to basically use me in a way that was like that was just the best for the best thing that I could do for his cause, basically, and then things opened up after that. Then in the NZF opportunity came up, and other opportunities and relationships and as I said, resources and whatever else. So it's definitely, I'm not saying that people should just be gung-ho and abandon everything they're doing and just, go into whatever. That's why actually this Last Day Leader program that I run is typically trying to help people think about the principles and the objectives and and the motivations, and to give courage, because it does need courage. Like if you're not willing to take a risk in life, then you can forget about anything. I mean, everything involves risk. Everything involves uncertainty. The question is, what are you risking, and for who, and for what? Everything carries its risks, right? And in the end, you just want to pursue the most noble path that you can possibly pursue, basically. And that's the key thing. I think it's very important that all of us, in order to live free, independent, confident lives, we have to constantly question the motivations and the real reason as to why we spend our time doing whatever we're doing today. It's very important that we do that, because when we examine it deeply and carefully, we realize that oftentimes the prime thing that's motivating us in our lives often is fear. Yeah. Fear of insufficient resources, fear of insufficient income, fear of other people, fear of letting whoever down, some other person down, fear of not meeting the expectations, right, of parents or spouse or whoever. There's also fear, that kind of fear, But what if we had true fear of Allah, which would eclipse all the other fears? What would that lead us to do? So it's very useful for us to at least begin to explore, like, the avenues or the possibilities, and to envision something in our lives that we really want to do. And I think that when somebody finds the intersection between the thing that they think would be most useful to other people, what they love doing, and what they're skilled at doing, what they're good at as well, and they put together something, even a simple idea or a plan or something that they want to do, they should really just start getting going with that. And I believe that ultimately anything that is valuable for people will become sustainable. And there's so many, I mean, in today's day and age, because many people ask me, oh, you left banking, you took a risk, you literally didn't know what was going to happen next in terms of your income, right? Like for me at that time, I just believed Allah was going to take care of me. Like I just had that, and it came true, if you like, yeah. The wish came true. So that happened, right? And Allah does provide. Like, it's all very well us saying Allah is the provider, but we don't behave like that. We think we are the provider, or our company is the provider, or whoever. That's how we behave. We don't sometimes really have that conviction. But I just think that I think things open up if you have something valuable to offer. In the end, it will become sustainable. And today's day and age in history, like the opportunities, people are sustaining themselves doing all sorts of completely random things nowadays. Like the nature of the economy, jobs, like it's all in flux. Everything's changing a lot, right? And actually, but it's opening opportunities up like anything. Internet technology, connecting our ability to connect with each other, to message whoever, just for us to come together in the way that we're coming together. I mean, such a gathering, even just something simple like this, even not so long ago, wouldn't have been even feasible or possible, or we couldn't conceive of. So I'm just saying that the opportunities are there. And when you go out there with your intention, your message, your motivation, your service, when you ask Allah and you rely on Allah, and you are clear with people about what it is that you want to do, and you put it out there, and it's valuable, things will work out, inshallah, things will work out. And it will not say there won't be challenges, it won't be tough, but that's life. But that's what we want. Allah will test us, but we have to overcome and keep going.
Yeah. So you mentioned the importance of struggling for Allah's cause. And you also mentioned the importance of envisioning or having a vision about what you want to do. I have two questions about that. So let's say you really want to struggle more for Allah's cause. First, is it a full-time job, first of all? And the second thing is, can you do that basically randomly, trying to support any kind of needs in your region or whatever, or does it need to be aligned with your own personal vision of what you want to accomplish for the community and for the deen of Allah?
Yeah. So yeah, it doesn't have to. The thing is, I think it's better not to think about it in terms of job or not job. Let's leave that aside for a second. Just think about it in terms of, can you spend increasing amounts of your time, right, doing things which you feel this is for the cause of Allah? And remember what we mean by that. We mean by that the intention and the effort and the strategy is to try to increase people's awareness, connection to their Lord, that they find guidance. Now that can there's a huge number of avenues or ways in which that can take place. It can happen. And it doesn't have to, you don't have to, not everybody has to do it for all people, of course, right? So, but it's just to get you to think about, how can I facilitate things? Now, it might end up being that I'm spending my money, I'm spending my time, I'm bringing people together, I'm volunteering for something. But my intention and the intention is that this straight path is facilitated for more people. more people are guided, more people find their Lord, more people stay, if you like, guided, right? And they stay connected to their Lord. That's the intention. So whatever, one can think of. And then, of course, that's why then you think, well, we all have different interests, skills, passions, right? Things that excite us, whatever. So we will all end up doing different things. We all have different roles to play. That's for us to discover and to find out. And Allah has made us all in unique and particular ways. And actually, sometimes it's about thinking, okay, Allah has made me in such a way. He's put me in such and such a place, in such and such a time, right? Mm-hmm. The point is, okay, it's like, in one way, the way I think about it, it's like, you got to play the game, right? Like, if you think about, in some ways, if you think about your life almost like a computer game, you're the character, you're the player. You've been put into the scene, right? What's the objective? What do you need to do now? Look at, there's all this stuff going on around you. Well, chart the course that's going to result in the highest score, basically, So how do I do that? In all different games, that exist, that we humans come up with, that's basically what it is. There's an objective. And sometimes more sophisticated, not that I'm any expert in this, of course, but more sophisticated games, the particular objective is not always necessarily clear, but you've got to discover it, find it, explore, go, right? And it evolves in that way. But that's basically life, So it's like, well, what game are you even in? Or are you even playing it, basically? And this is actually, when I say that, what I mean, the more formal or appropriate way to say it, perhaps, is it's about saying, am I playing the dunya game, or am I playing the akhirah game, right? Like, am I just basically doing the things that need to be done to advance myself in this life, or am I really doing the things that are going to advance me in the hereafter? So it's not, so I wouldn't think about it normally as a full-time job, not full-time job. I would think about it in the context of adding value. But of course, if somebody wants to try to find a way in order to make their work for Allah's cause, they want to spend more time doing it. And in order for them to be able to do it, they need to be able to find a way to sustain themselves at the same time. Then obviously you would want to seek some alignment between what you're doing for Allah's cause, and how that is adding value, and how that can then be a source of sustainability. And people obviously sometimes they struggle with this idea, and I appreciate why, because sometimes we think about money as an evil and a corrupter, basically. But we have to appreciate and realize something, that even zakat, one of the categories of zakat is fi sabilillah. One of the points of zakat was that not just you help the poor and everything else, but you help the people in your community who are at the forefront, who need to be freed up to basically advance the cause or defend the cause. It's a little bit like when we pay council tax or pay national taxation, and part of our taxation is funding civil servants, right? Bureaucrats, officials, or whatever, right? To keep the machinery of government and society going, so that it provides a cohesive thing. So, like, that's just a matter of your own intention. Like, the fact that somebody is receiving funds in order to sustain themselves, so that they can do the work that they need to do, that's completely fine, because that was the case at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's in the Quran, and it's now, like, one way or the other. Sometimes we think it's more noble to earn your money with quote unquote a normal job than it is, for example, that if you received a salary for doing charity work or some public service or whatever. But public services don't function unless people are paid. Like, that's just how it works, right? Like, we don't say, for example, to the doctor that somehow his or her effort is lacking because they're paid to do their work, right? Now, it's up to the doctor whether their main motivation is the money or to help people. But the fact that they need to be paid in order to be free to do the thing. So in your case, all of you individually, like, if you shouldn't be put off by the fact that if you are thinking about how can I provide the service or do the thing that I want to do whilst earning an income from it, or being supported for it, so that I can carry on doing it and grow it. And so even for me, I've had to think about that bit, right? And you have to think about it regularly in terms of your intention and everything else. But the point is that in principle, it's necessary, because I wouldn't be able to full-time dedicate myself to doing what I'm doing if it wasn't for the fact that, for example, some people would support me. Some people have supported me. They've seen what I'm doing. They want to support and they provide funds, or I charge for courses that I teach in order to make it sustainable, right, et cetera, et cetera. Like, yeah. So I think that that's important. In terms of the other thing you mentioned about the vision, like, so the point about the vision is simply, if the way I think about vision, or get people to think about vision, is think about it as your destination, right? We talk about journeying and where you're trying to go. So the question basically is that what exactly are you trying to achieve, right? Like, so all of us should be able to describe that. And that's a difficult process for many people. But then I said to people, look, what is it that's of interest to you? So some people might come up, for example, after thinking about it, or they'll say, my vision is that young people, and maybe specifically young Muslims in my community, have access to the knowledge, the education, the networks that will help them remain firm and steadfast as believers. Okay? And today that's not the case. Today it might be the case for some people, but maybe we'll identify that most young people, they don't have that access, the networks, the support that they need to navigate life and to grow up in such a way that they can remain faithful, because there's lots of sources of confusion and temptation and whatever else. But my vision is that that will not be the case, that there will be a really strong environment in which they can grow and flourish, etc. Yeah. So then the question is, okay, fine. So what needs? So that's the vision then. So now what needs to happen? So now you think about your mission, your strategy. Okay, what needs to happen, and where do I fit in? Oh, we need youth clubs, for example. That might be one conclusion. We need to make sure that in the locality, there is a youth club, a Muslim youth club, for example, or just a youth club that anyone can come to. They can benefit from, socialize, hear some things that will be beneficial, ask their questions. You know, nothing is, there's no question that can't be asked, right? We bring other people together to mentor, to buddy them, blah, 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 whatever. That's just an example, random example, okay? And then, so the point is then, okay, I have a vision, I have a strategy. Now, what do I do about it? Now, I might be working full time in such and such a thing, but in the evenings and weekends, I can get going. And for just that as an example, is it possible that something like this, what I'm describing, can function, can grow and flourish and function in such a way that somebody who's really keen to pursue this idea can then can make this sustainable as well? Because, for example, parents may pay for their children to access the service. Now, this doesn't mean that people who can't pay can't be in, because you can simply have a bursary program, whatever. Like even me for my courses, I have a thing. If people can't afford it, I always encourage people to get in touch, let me know, and either they can pay a discount or pay over time, or sometimes I just give it to them for free if they generally can't afford it. So you can have that, right? So money doesn't have to be a barrier for people, but it can be a way for people to take it seriously. That's something which is natural psychology, and to sustain the operation. So now you can have better equipment, or you can have people who are paid to, people who have skills and abilities to do youth work to do it, for the administration, for the organization, etc. Because if you want to pull off a service that's going to cater for 5,000 young people in your city, well, obviously that's a full operation, but that's possible. But it's only possible if you want it to happen, if you pursue it, and obviously the resourcing part of it is also important. So that's just an example of how you might think of, here's a vision, this is the situation today, this is what needs to happen to go from here to there, this is what I need to do, this is where I fit in, and this is what I'm going to go and do. Now, for me, that's leadership. That's leadership. Yeah. Leadership is, you identify a problem, here's a solution, here's the outcome I want. I'm going to initiate this, talk to people about it, tell people about it, start to do the work, trial, test, bring things together, let it grow, pursue it. And that's it. And that's how things work in life. So all of us can think carefully, what is it that I want to achieve? And it doesn't need to be like grand and global. Yeah, it can be very specific and very local, but deep. Like deep. Sometimes there's a big benefit in focus and going deep, because then you achieve some real, achieve some real impact. So that's the idea, inshallah.
All right, barakallahu feek. I had so many other questions, but I'm conscious about the time, and I want to give the listeners the opportunity to ask some questions at the end. I will just end with the last question, inshallah. Speaking of struggle, every society has its own context, and everyone has its own context. I guess you are a little bit familiar with the situation of the Muslim in France. My question is, should the expectation be the same for any kind of context?
Yeah, no, fine. So I think when you have different contexts, you'll have different approaches, right? But the end goal is the same, in broad terms at least. The idea of striving fi sabilillah, and the idea that fi sabilillah means that Allah will be uppermost in the hearts and minds of people in society, even if it seems like, as we said, an impossibility in a place like France or whatever, given the situation, right? Like, broadly speaking, that is the goal, the same. Now, the approach you will take, how you go about it, will depend on obviously the local local situation. But what I think is important is that just because there are objections, or there is animosity, or there is a strong opposing views, that should not mean that we are not clear and bold in what we want to do. Because the thing is this, it's like Ibrahim said to his people, كيف أخاف ما أشركتم ولا تخافون أنكم أشركتم بالله ما لم ينزل به سلطانا فأي الفريقين أحق بالأمن إن كنتم تعلمون الذين آمنوا ولم يلبسوا إيمانهم بظلم أولئك لهم الأمن وهم مهتدون. It's very powerful. Ibrahim says to his people, he's calling them, they're opposing him. Yeah, and they said, just like people say today, like, why are you asking us to leave this and that? This is how we are. This is our way of life. Yeah, and then they'll say, can you go home? So, well, this is my home, right? So they say, like, this is our way of life. This is what we've always done. This is the way. This is our way, the British way, the French way, or whatever way. Yeah. So why are you introducing this, Oriental whatever here? Yeah, or whatever it is. So we would say, how I'm not going to be afraid of the way in which you relate to God or associate with God when you don't fear the fact that you are associating with him in ways that don't have any proof or any support, for which no proof has been sent down. So our fear of other people cannot be as great as, or we should think to ourselves, hang on a second, they're not afraid that they are disobeying Allah, right? Abandoning God, mocking God. They're not afraid. They're doing that. So why should we be afraid of basically doing the opposite, of demonstrating our belief and advocating in a positive way? Now, of course, and then Ibrahim said, well, which of these two parties, which of these two groups, ahaqqu bil amn, is more deserving of safety and security? If you knew, or if you would consider this. And then Allah, or he says, or the response is that those who don't clothe their faith bidhulmin, which is in the commentaries mentioned as basically who don't corrupt their faith with shirk and other things, but they have this pure connection with their Lord. Those are the ones for whom there is security and safety, and they are the ones who are guided. So the point is that our confidence, and this is why prayer, etc., is very important, because our confidence should come from our conviction, our belief in our Lord. And we all know that we are only here as believers today because people historically, over many centuries, have struggled and sacrificed and lost lives and lost whatever resources, whatever. Like, they've made the sacrifice, they've made the struggle. And this is not just particular to us and belief. This is just the way of the world. For anything to move forward in this life, it requires struggle. And when the people stop struggling or stop caring, that's when things undo themselves. And that applies to anything and everything, in business, in any cause. We gave some examples earlier, whatever, like across the board, that is how it is. So, so it's just a matter of, it's a matter of confidence and but intelligence as well. It's very important that we are not hasty. It's very important that we don't allow our own egos and our own anger and our own frustration to be the drivers, So good character combined with confidence, combined with intelligent strategy, combined with a real empathy for your people, even though those people may be against you. This is the prophetic way. We all know that. Yeah, we all know that. The prophetic strategy, when in times of relative weakness or being in a minority and being, up against it, if you like, is to combine a clear message with confidence and to solidify and secure your own people and to unify them with good character and just consistently plugging away. Yeah. And that's what we need to do. I can't hear you actually. Is that my side? I don't know. I can't. Just check your speaker settings maybe. Well, I don't know if anyone else can mention in the chat if they can hear abdelrahmen. Yeah, okay. Other people can't hear you either, so he's coming back. Okay. I'll have a look at the chat, the questions in the chat. So Salma asks, as a question for Q&A in relation to this, could you please give us some advice on how to build up our confidence, show our Muslim identity openly at work or university? What can we start as habits towards this? So I would say that in regards to that question, I would say that, look, effectively just be yourself, so anything that you might say or do normally or otherwise, just say or do the same things. That's really it, so if you were going to pray when you were at home or amongst fellow Muslims, and then the time comes to pray when you're at work or university, then you go and pray and you do that, right? If you were yeah, and if you would have explained your motivation, to do such and such a thing, or you would use certain language, for example, like I often use this example of, amongst each other, we will say, inshallah, right, all the time. Inshallah, I'll do this. Inshallah, I'll see you tomorrow. Inshallah, this will go well. But then when we're speaking with others, we won't say the equivalent. We won't say, if God wills or God willing. That's a good example, even though it might occur to us in our minds, because we know that when we're saying something about the future, then it is appropriate to recognize the fact that that is dependent on Allah, right? But we oftentimes will stop ourselves from using such language. So there's something about that that's also a bit inauthentic, right? Because who are we saying it for? Ultimately, we're actually saying it because it means we mean it. We really mean that, okay, if Allah wills, it will happen. And we remind ourselves and those around us that it's dependent upon him. So that's an example, something simple. So the thing is that in answer to the question, or the thing to notice is that you can't fake it, right? You just need to basically be yourself. Abdelrahmen, I'm just answering one of the questions in the chat. Yeah.
Yes. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? I was testing the. Sorry. All right. Thanks for. No, I can't see the question in the chat anymore, but it's okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah. The question was. The question was to give some advice on how to build up confidence and show Muslim identity openly at work or university. What can we start as habits towards this? So, in summary, when there will come these moments when, oh, should I say this or shouldn't I say this? Should I do this or shouldn't I do this? And then the point is, just do the right thing at that time. That's really it. It's not a particular habit, or you can't manufacture it. You just need to be natural. Be yourself as you would have done, and don't let fear be the reason as to why you don't do something which would otherwise be natural to you. I think that's what I would say. There's another question. Shall I just take that one?
Just one question for Iqbal. Do you have extra minutes to answer any other question? How much time? 5 minutes? 10 minutes? Okay. All right. If anyone has any other question that they would like to ask, you can either use the chat or use the reaction. You can raise your hand if you click on the reaction item.
Yeah, there was a question from before. I have a question about diplomas or masters that enable to win some credibility in Islamic philanthropy and finance. I'm coming from a banking background and did an MBA, but I'm wary of building also some credibility on the topic to have a brilliant start in the matter, please. So this area it's not an area that I am I don't have, say, specific advice or recommendations in terms of things to look at. However, there is a website I can put in the chat, which is run by a friend called IslamicFinanceGuru.com. And maybe if I put this way, it will be clickable. So that's something which is just, you can basically have a look or contact them, because they will have more of an idea of this kind of thing. That link is clickable. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? How can we ensure that our actions are exclusively for Allah without our intention being distracted by other objectives? Yeah, it's a good question, and it's obviously a very vital question. I think the only thing you can, I think there's a few things. So I think that it's good to give attention to doing, in a way, this is where our individual worship, so it's very interesting. So at the beginning of this discussion, we were distinguishing between our individual worship, individual journeying towards Allah, and then we were talking about facilitating, the same for others, etc. As we do more of the latter, so as we do more in terms of public service and everything else, sometimes what can happen for people initially is that they find that their own worship, their individual worship, actually suffers as a result. Yeah, either because of the, somehow they, their individual connection with Allah, right, and their worship and prayer and whatever, like it is not the same, right, and it seems to be suffering, and that requires attention. So what we need to do is almost very consciously increase in our own quality and consistency of prayer, remembrance, the private things, the things that no one else knows, only you know and Allah knows. That's it. So consciously try to increase those things. That's something which for you then will become something valuable to you, and a way to settle your own mind as well, because it can become quite stressful when you're thinking about, are my intentions really for Allah? Who's this for? Like, am I a hypocrite? These questions, which are important questions to ask oneself. But the more you can do where it's just you and Allah, there's no one else, and ultimately, that feels truer to you than anything else. You know what I mean? I also think that, again, before and after actions, or public actions, again, almost just speaking with Allah before and after, privately, So when something like this, when something happens, it finishes that, are you asking Allah do you ask Allah to accept from you and to, you relate to him? Yeah, you have that personal relationship going on simultaneously. So these are the things. Now, at the end of the day, the matter of intention and all these things are difficult issues. And the only way we really know is in a way we will never know, but that's the point. We can only try and be as sincere as we can, and just complement public actions with private actions. And that's really the best thing I can say. Yeah.
All right, so we have another question in the chat, and Salma also raised her hand. So up to you to decide.
Right, maybe Salma, you go ahead, inshallah, and then I'll take the other.
Yeah, hi, Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
My question is a bit weird, so I'm trying to put it up well. So how to reconcile between the fact that that Allah can actually test you as he tested the prophets, for example, to let you starve for a while, or not give you the financial support, or not open the doors at that time for XYZ, and still have the confidence you mentioned that, okay, I'm abandoning everything for Allah's sake and he's going to provide. Because I'm trying to convince myself of that, but it could also be an ibtila at the same time.
Yeah. So I think that the best thing to do is obviously to try to, the way to overcome it or go around the problem almost is to initially, if someone's at an initial stage of thinking about these things, is to have things going in parallel. So things are rarely binary. It's rarely the case that until I abandon, whatever I'm doing now, I can't do anything for the thing I want to do. You can just start to work on whatever it is. So in a way, you just escape the question for now, at least. You're doing whatever you're doing right now as your kind of day-to-day, or obviously I don't know what your own individual circumstances are, but for argument's sake, let's say somebody's involved in a job, it's taking up a lot of their time, their effort, their energy, they don't really feel a connection with it, they want to do other things. So get clarity on what it is that you want to do, why you want to do it, etc. And then think about, well, where do I start? And then whether it might involve a combination of some learning that you want to do, some actions, some volunteering, some getting on with it, whatever it is. So what I'm saying is, it's very common for a lot of people who feel stuck in their current situation to not actually be doing anything to move towards the ideal, because it's almost like they've convinced themselves that until I'm out of what I'm doing right now, well, I can't really start to do that either. But as I said, it's not either or. So I think because the reason I'm saying this, because once you start to do something, actions, then things develop and build in such a way that the possibility of you testing the sustainability element comes in. Do you understand? So, so for example, it's very common that many people who might be, say, in employed roles, right, in various jobs or whatever, that they want to start their own business. Okay, so they'll start their own business in the evenings, weekends. They'll be working on it. They test, and then over time, maybe a year, 2, 3 years down the line, now it's developed and grown into something that enables them. They can make the transition now. Now that doesn't mean there's not future risk. It doesn't mean that things might go badly. It may well do. But that's, as I said, that's life. You know, and oftentimes it's interesting, isn't it? Because we often think that the security for us depends on what we're doing right now. But guess what? There were people with completely stable and normal jobs in Ukraine up until 3 days ago, right? They just got invaded, you know? So people can be made redundant. Recession can strike, and then all of a sudden, you know. So sometimes it's not that, oh, this particular, you know, it's a mistake, or we delude ourselves sometimes to think, oh, this is a secure path. This is an insecure path. Sometimes we should just think in the context of this is the right path, or the best path, the most noble path, and pursue and just pursue it as much as we can. I think that's those are the things that come to mind.
I see, because the present is also insecure. You mean that Allah could stop providing right now?
Yeah, of course, exactly. Okay. Exactly. And it's funny because I mean, it's not that funny, but I've experienced this before. You know, people oftentimes, I've met a few people over the years, because I've had these types of conversations with so many people over the years, and many people, they will they will be in their whatever job they're in, and they will be talking to me about the fact that they want to leave and they want to get out and do all of this and that. And then we will have the conversation, and still a few months later, they haven't had the courage to do that, even though they really want to, but they just feel afraid. And then I can think of a few people who then just a few months after that, they were made redundant anyway. They lost their jobs anyway. You know, sometimes they're just forced out into a situation now, you know, where into the open, okay, what do I do? So I think really all it is, the thing is that if we are, look, it's not that stability of income I'm not, you know, I want to be clear. It's not that this is a bad thing. It's a necessary thing to have resources. You need to feed yourself, your family, whatever, right? And you need to do these things and advance in that way. I'm not critical of that, but my critique, if you like, or my recommendation to myself and then to everybody else is to think about, what are you exchanging for that? That's the key thing. What are you giving up to receive that? What are you sacrificing? At least know what you're sacrificing. You see, most people don't even know what they're sacrificing because they don't even thinking about what a higher possibility. And that for me is a real shame. You know, that's a real shame. That's like that feels like a very like someone's half buried already. Do you see what I'm trying to say? Like they're just sunken. They can't aspire to anything higher because they're being kept down, you know, at a sort of lower level of living almost, when higher possibilities exist and we are encouraged to move towards them. So yeah.
Super clear. Thank you.
I'll take the one in the chat and then Sarah, and then we'll close. Is that okay?
All right. Perfect. Nice.
Let's do that. All right. So Sarah in the chat, she said, Assalamu alaikum. I also have a question regarding working for Allah, suppose helping your Islamic community, how to feel legitimate in what we do, knowing there are people 10 times better than us and even more knowledge of us in terms of science or other topics. Yes. No, good. The thing is this, right, is that it's a good question. It's a very common feeling as well. You know, who am I? It's called the imposter syndrome. You know, I'm an imposter. Like, I'm not even the real deal. Who am I to do anything? Who am I to tell anyone anything or say this or encourage this person? Look at me. I've got so many flaws, weaknesses, issues, whatever. Yeah. Now, so on the one hand, yes, we should never enter. We should be very cautious of talking about things that we don't understand. Obviously, right? If we haven't given the time to think about it, to understand it, to learn, to study, depending on, obviously, it depends on what it is. So before a certain level of action, there's a certain level of knowledge that is required. At the same time, though, I would say that a lot of us, we might suffer from the opposite problem. Actually, we do know more than we think we know. We're not even acting in a way that reflects that. So sometimes we have the knowledge for certain things, but we don't have the actions. And the thing is that all of us here we're all believers, and we all have our reasons for being believers, and we all have our motivations. That in and of itself qualifies you to share with other people, for example, like, you know, to share your own story and your own thinking with others. Why can't you do that? You can do that. You see, the things that, for example, if we're talking about here, just sharing a part of what we're talking about is about showing other people what it's like to go on that path and that journey. Well, why can't we can do that? Because we do that. We actually do that ourselves. That's something we can share and do. Then, of course, yes, for anything else, we need to assess what is our skills and what have you. Sometimes the work or the role that is required doesn't necessarily require as much, quote unquote, you know, Islamic knowledge, but it just requires certain skills. And you know that you're working towards a cause, right, to do certain things. So, for example, in National Zakat Foundation, we had a team at times of 25, 30 people, for example, at times. Some of those people knew a lot more about zakat than others. But that's fine, because for some roles, you didn't need to have a deep knowledge about zakat. But some people had strong understandings of, you know, administration or finance or governance or marketing or whatever, right? But everyone had like a minimum sort of knowledge or awareness, but people varied. So you have to relate the specific type of knowledge and thing to whatever else. And also realize finally that it could well be shaitan who's telling you you're not good enough. Don't bother, don't try. Yeah, that can be a devil's deception as well. So if we all think like that, which on the one hand feels like a noble way to think, but if we all do that, we'll all sit and do nothing, and then nothing will happen. You know? So it's this idea of pushing forward, striving, but then also, as per the earlier question, you know, just evaluating your own sincerity and just keeping that going and increasing your knowledge at the same time. But one thing I have found, the last thing, sorry, actually, is to say that, you know, like they often say the best way to gain in knowledge is to teach. Now that might sound funny, because actually surely I need the knowledge in order to teach. But I have found that to be the case. When you teach and you start to say certain things, like what I know about Salah today is more than when the first time I started teaching about Salah, because of the process of teaching, you see. So that also makes, when you're actually in the, you're in something, you're doing something, you're not just theorizing, but you're hearing from people, you're interacting with people. That learning that you get out is sometimes a lot more valuable and makes you more relevant as well. Because we all know there's lots of sheikhs and scholars and whoever who unfortunately are not very relevant to people, because they don't engage with them in that real way. Sometimes they haven't done, a lot of them, the real work. Many of them have never lived normal lives or done normal jobs or whatever. So they're not able sometimes to relate in the same way, you know? So I'm just saying there's a value in getting on with things and learning as you go through things. At the same time, whilst not entering into things or saying things about matters that obviously you don't know, but that's powerful. Things will come up. I don't know. Great. Now let me go and find out. Yes, Saad.
So I just in the European debate and like the Central European debate, France, like Germany, Switzerland, when people live here, and I mean, I'm also here, we feel, you spoke before about fear, and we have our personal fear about rizq and about the like how we can sustain ourselves. But there is another fear where, as you may have heard, is especially in France, but also like it exists as well in Switzerland, people don't go forward or don't expose themselves or don't like take action because of the fear of I will be targeted. They will talk about me. They will target me, the media, whatever. Yeah. So, and this component is actually, and sometimes because in some chats or some groups, people don't take action because of that fear of being especially targeted by the media or even the police or whatever, for any reason. So what is your advice? Of course, UK is another context, is something else, but how, from your experience now, and especially if we think about zakat in Europe overall, because the narrative is, because zakat is for Islam and Muslimin, how would you advise the French fellows or German or whatever about this to take action, move forward?
Yeah, so I think that there's a couple of things. So, well, generally, I would just say that it's worth us thinking about how can we use language to describe what it is that we're doing and why we are doing it that is universally appealing. That's the key thing, I think. You see? So that takes a bit of work, it takes a bit of time, but how can we describe? And that this is really important, because I think that, again, I think there's a prophetic kind of thing in this, which is that if we are saying things or doing things in a way that is only causing alarm to people and not communicating them in any way value and why this is a good thing for everybody, then we should just question ourselves to see, is there ways that we can change and improve the way in which we are communicating about certain things, so that that fear within us and frankly in others, right, or reduce it. Now, I'm not saying it can be completely eliminated sometimes, because sometimes you'll have that prejudice regardless and whatever else, right? But just usage of words and language is very important. So for example, even a very simple thing, like even say in the UK context, like for me, there's a big difference in terms of how it's received. If I say constantly, oh, the work is about the future of Islam and Muslims, and Islam is going to be dominant and da 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 and all of this, right? We say that, and that's why we're here. And Muslims are going to take over and all of this stuff. Okay, so if you're going to use language like this, which might be in some context an appropriate language to use in terms of what you're trying to say, but you can see also clearly why that's going to cause alarm to people, right? But there's a way of basically saying exactly the same thing, but in a way that frankly that doesn't seem as threatening, let's say, to people, or it seems in a way that actually, or that it seems more reasonable. So for example, if you was to put that same thing in the context of actually then, interestingly, just to say that, our intention is for more people to live God-centered lives, to live ethical lives, upright lives, to be people who value A, B, C, D, and E, right, in terms of things that we feel are important and valuable, and to have to help people overcome their current states of anxiety and depression and lack of direction and uncertainty, with something that gives them more in terms of blah, 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 right, et cetera, et cetera. And just as an example, you can see why this kind of language is clearer, more appealing, might even bring some interest from people, but it's basically saying the same thing. Yeah. So obviously it depends on the context, but I do think language is a big part of the answer to what you're talking about, because sometimes we don't help ourselves with our own ways of saying things. Other than that, obviously it would depend on a specific scenario, specific situation, our own fears, but that's something maybe we can, you and I can pick up on, separately, inshallah. I will take one last one here, because there is a last question in the chat, so just to complete it, but please don't ask any more now, because we've got to move on. Lucas says, Salam alaikum, the need to build bridges of understanding, compassion between different ethnic groups, believers or non-believers, participates in the service of Allah. Oh, so I think you're asking, like, does that count as part of this? And should we act in this direction in order to fit in as an actor of our contemporary society to convert the love of Allah into more global social action? So in brief, yes, of course, if we are able to build bridges between believers and others, and if our intention in building those bridges is, again, because we want this faith to flourish, a lot of this to do with the intention and motivation, right? Then, of course, that can be very meaningful action. Remember, again, just going back to it's interesting, the zakat categories, one of them is mu'allafat al-qulub, to inclining the hearts, So the idea is that bringing hearts together, because if you're doing the kind of work that builds bridges between believers and others, and this is where intelligence and approach and how you approach things comes into play, yeah, because you can go out there into society and say, actually, even further to the last question, to say that, look, right now, we want to be a unified. We want, as believers, we want a unified society. Yeah, we want people to, and for there to be good relationships between people, right? We want that. So if we want that, so we're going to create spaces for conversations in which that can happen. We can facilitate that. We can learn from each other, understand each other, right? Start piloting certain things. So these are really powerful things, even if it feels like soft action, if you like. Yeah, you might call it soft power, soft action, right? Where it's just building bridges. So of course that can be very, very valuable. And as you said, these kinds of things can then lead on to, and you know, like greater efforts, and hopefully people finding their Lord, and that again resulting in more positive action, etc. So there, I think we'll conclude there, inshallah.
Barakallah fiqh, Iqbal. Thanks, Iqbal, for those very insightful answers. How can people see you, the listener, can see your work, what you do, reach out to you if they have questions? Is that possible?
Yeah. So I'll just put my my email address in the chat. So anyone, you're welcome to get in touch. So that's my email address, and my website is quite simple. It's just my name, and that's my website there. So yeah, please feel free to be in touch. Inshallah, I'll do my best to respond or help in any way I can. And may Allah bless you all, and thank you again for the opportunity. And may He make us all people who strive to become better, to do better, and to achieve more and more for His sake and for His cause. And ultimately, you know, that's a life worth pursuing, worth living. And I think the important thing in the end is that we try to live lives where we don't have regrets. We want to just feel and know that we did our best, we strove, and we truly live to La ilaha illallah, that Allah was first and last and in the middle of all our considerations, and we didn't let our worries and fears of people and the world and whatever prevent us from doing the things that would demonstrate our connection with our Lord. And to close, when we go towards Him, He will pull us through. We have to have that confidence. We have to have that belief, that conviction. And if we don't, then that, you know, that reveals something about something is broken in our relationship or our understanding of who our Lord is. You know, have a positive view of your Lord and what He's going to do for you when you show Him what you're going to do for Him. So with that, we ask Allah to accept and to bless us all.
It was a real pleasure to host you today. I pray Allah that He helps you achieve your current goals and help us all to get closer to Him, inshallah.
Take care, everyone. Take care.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.